All right, so now to make Sancho move. So I've already I've already created this. And so instead of boring you with point, click, and all the long process, I'm going to step you through what I did and have it all here so you can see it all laid out. Your author has a really nice step-by-step. So there in chapter 4, read that carefully. He does a really good job of being very stepwise in leading you through this process. But to get things started, we're going to go to Sancho, our Sancho folder, and where you have your knight, where we've defined all of our animations that we parsed from the master clip that we did last time. We're going to take him and just drag him right up into the hierarchy. So you can either drag him there, or you can drag him and put him anywhere here in the game world. They're in scene view, and just drop him in. I've already done that. I already have a knight character here. And as I mentioned, he already has an animation component. We're going to need to add another component to make him part of, or to allow him to be controlled as a player character. So we're going to add what's called the character controller. And so you'll go down, this is in the inspector, go down to the bottom of the inspector, click on add component. And then you can see there's tons of different types of components that we can add. You're going to look for character controller. And the easiest way to do this is up here in the search bar, right up top. Just start typing character and it will automatically reduce your options to what matches the string you've put in the text bar or in the search bar. So right here, character controller, click and add that to your knight. Once you have that, that will automatically create a capsule collider. And so if you see the green little capsule thing here, that is a collider that is going to define the limits or the boundaries of your character. This is independent of the mesh of the character. This defines the collision area around your knight. Now, as soon as you add this, it'll put in some default values here that probably won't match your knight very well at all. So you'll want to play with where the center is. Now the center should be fine in X and Z. Remember, our ground plane is the XZ plane. Y is vertical. And so we'll probably want to monkey with the Y component of the center position to raise this capsule up and down until it is centered on Sancho. You'll want to change the radius. And here I'm going to change the radius from what I have right now to 0.2 to 1. You can see it really broadens it out. Or if I put 0.1, you can see it's really too narrow and Sancho is kind of outside of our capsule. So I'm going to bring the radius back to 2. You want the height to enclose Sancho, but not be too high above him. And also you want to make sure that your capsule rests right above or right at his feet. This is going to define where it touches the ground. And so change the height until that capsule is just at the perfect height to encapsulate his head and just touch the ground, just graze it. So play with that until you get that set just right, and then we're good. The next thing we need to do is add a Playmaker finite state machine. So with the knight selected, come up to Playmaker, open the Playmaker editor. Now in my layout, especially for this monitor, which is a little wider than normal, I have the Playmaker editor window kind of embedded as part of my layout. If you have the real estate for this, and it makes editing a lot simpler, a lot easier, because then you're not trying to search and find things all over the place. Now, something new for 2019 that didn't exist when your author was writing this text was a lot of new prefab features and abilities and mechanics. So when we select the knight and add a new component to it, and especially if we try to add a Playmaker script to this, we'll see this prefab override. And we're not going to mess with this right now. So by not touching this, we're just going to mess around with the Sancho character, the game object that we have in our hierarchy. This will not affect our knight prefab. Now, what we can do later is once we get everything sorted exactly the way we want, we can hit apply, and it'll save all of the Playmaker script features and functionalities that we've created, and apply it to the Sancho Knight prefab. So now we can just drag and drop the knight wherever we like, and it will come with all these mechanics that we're getting ready to build. So once you have the editor, yours will be blank, and you'll have to right click and add a finite state machine. Now, something really important, and I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again, I'll probably say it more times this semester. Documentation is absolutely critical. So don't just leave your state machines with their default name and no description. Make sure that you come here and give it a sensible name. In this case, we're going to name our state machine movement, because that's what we want to do. We want this to control the movement of Sancho. So we're going to call it movement, and then in the description, we're going to give a plain language explanation of what we intend this to do. And for this, we're just going to worry about moving Sancho forward and back. That's all that this state machine is going to do. We're going to move forward, we're going to move him back, or we're going to let him be at idle. So when you create this, the first state you'll have will be labeled state 1, and you'll want to rename that state to idle. So when there's no input, when your player is not touching the keyboard, they're not trying to move Sancho, so no key is being pressed, we want this to be the default state. We want Sancho to just be idle, but we don't want him to be static. Idle is not the same as static. We want him to be there kind of shuffling around like a person normally would. A person doesn't just stand still like a statue. There's little subtle movements that they make. And with Sancho, occasionally one of them is going to be a wave. So we want to, in this idle state, we want to cycle through a series of animations. Now, we have 3 different idle animations that we've defined. So we're going to ask Playmaker to play one of those 3 at random. So we're going to come down here to the action browser, and then we're going to look for play random animation. And here, under animation, there it is, play random animation. So double click that, and it'll put it into your state, into the idle state. And we're at first it's just going to say I think 1, but we're going to select 3. So type 3 into the number of animations and hit tab, and then you'll have 1, 2, 3 windows now, animation and wait. So what this is asking is, what animation do you want to play, and how probable do you want this animation to come up? So we're going to click the ellipses, the 3 dots right here, And it will look at the Knight game object and give you a list of all the animations that's attached to that object. And so we've already created a whole bunch of these for our Knight, for Sancho, and we're going to select in turn each of the idle animations. So idle, idle 1, and idle 2 for our 3 different animations that we want to have played. Now, we can have these play in with equal probability, or we can say, well, I want one animation, our first one, just idle, to come up more often than the others. And so under weight, and this is out of 1, we're gonna tell it to weight the very first one at 60%. So 0.6. That means 6 times out of 10, 60% of the time, it's going to select this first animation. 20% of the time, it's going to select idle 1. And 20% of the time, it might select idle 2. And we want to make sure we have stop all. And then our finish event, when it's done playing that animation, we want it to go back and do it again. So we're going to select finished as our event. And then you'll have to right click, add transition. You're going to add the finished transition to your idle state. And then grab it and loop it right back. So we're going to tell when you're finished, go back and do it again. So basically this is going to be a loop that we define. Now if that's all that we have, then Sancho would just sit there at idle and play through these animations and nothing else will happen. But we want to add basically a listener. We want an action that's going to be listening for some sort of keyboard input and then send an event or activate a transition when we hear a particular type of input. So that listener is called an axis event. So under Action Browser, you can type axis event. So this is under input, axis event, right there. Double click that and away we go. So when that first comes up, there will be a horizontal in here. We do not want this state to be worried at all about the horizontal movement. We're going to use that to make Sancho rotate. That's not what this state machine is going to be doing. We just want this state machine to worry about moving forward and back. So we're going to use the vertical axis. So to get rid of horizontal, you can just highlight it and delete, or the double bars here, you can click that and then unclick it and it's gone. Now we want to send an event for whether we're moving forward or whether we're moving back. And those are going to be 2 very different events. We want 2 different behaviors for those 2 different circumstances. So we need to add some custom events. Up here under events, click that. We can come down here towards the bottom where it says add event. And then you can add forward. It says I already have this in use. I could say go forward and then add. But since I already have that, I add the forward event, add another event that's backward. I'm going to add one more that's stop. We'll use stop here in a bit. On your idle state, make sure you add, so right click, add transition, add the backward and forward transitions to or events to your state. So with our forward and back events now created, we add them to our idle state. Remember, just right click, add transition, add forward, add backward. And we want to know, well, when do we activate those events? When do we engage those transitions? And so we're going to engage those transitions On an up event, if we press the up arrow, or a down event, when we press the down arrow. So if we press the up arrow, then we want Sancho to move forward. If we press the down arrow, we want Sancho to move backward. So we're just going to we're going to click on these and select the appropriate event. So up, we want to move forward. Down, we want to move backward. Now we want to create a new event. I'm sorry. Now we want to create a new state. We're going to actually create two, but they're going to be almost identical. So we're going to get to copy and paste a lot of our stuff instead of having to rewrite the same thing over again. We just write it once, copy and paste into our state for moving backward that we create from moving forward. So right click, add state, and it'll say state 2. We're going to rename that state move forward. Make sure to name it and give it a description. Documenting your stuff is so incredibly important. I can't stress that enough. From the idle state, click on the forward transition, drag it over to move forward. And then on move forward, we're going to right click, add transition. We're going to add a stop transition. So when we stop moving forward, we want it to return back to idle. Now, to know when we've stopped, again, we want to add an axis event listener. So action browser, and now this should be in your recent tab. So it should be right up there at the top, axis event. And again, we're going to get rid of the vertical, or get rid of the horizontal name here. So we just have vertical. And now we want, when there's no input, we're not pressing up, we're not pressing down, we're going to select no direction, stop. So that means when we let off the keyboard, we're going to go back to our idle state. Next, we need to know, well, what direction is forward? And so for this, we need a vector because we want to define a direction. Keep in mind that there are a variety of different types of variables we're going to be using. And I posted a PDF, a slide presentation on what these different types of variables are, when we use them, and what some of their characteristics, what some of their algebra is. A vector has a size and a direction. And here what's important for us is direction. What direction is forward? What direction are we facing? And so we're going to add the action get axis vector. Now, in order to give ourselves the ability to define what this vector is, we need to store that. So I'm going to come to variables, and there's going to be a couple of different variables that I want to define. I want to create a move speed, and that's going to be a float. So I'll come down here, new variable, you type in move speed, float, and add. And that will give you this. Now, with these variables, you have the name, you have the value. You can give a tooltip. That is, you can give a basic description of what this variable is so that when someone hovers over it, it'll pop up in a little tooltip box. And maybe you have a category. If you have a lot of variables you need to sort and organize, you can give them different categories. The inspector box, we'll show this to you here in a second. We're not going to worry about it for right now. The inspector box, you click that, it'll make this variable viewable and editable from the inspector so that we can change parameters on the fly if we need to. Then we need to add another new variable. We're going to add move vector. So you'll type in here move vector for your variable name. And then the pull down, we're going to select a vector 3. That is a vector that has 3 components, x, y, and z. A vector 2 only has two components, x and y. We want a vector 3, x, y, and z. So vector 3, there we go. So now you should have move speed and move vector. While we're here, might as well make run speed as well. And for run speed, notice the difference that I have. It's a float, but I have the inspector box clicked. So this will allow us to edit and change this on the fly there in the inspector as we choose. I've given it a current default value of 2. That means if we don't mess with it, its value will be 2, and we can mess with it later. So now going back to our state, we've added this event. We want to make sure we get rid of the, or added this, this action. We want to get rid of the horizontal axis, keep the vertical, and we don't want a multiplier. We just want to leave this as unity, because all we're concerned about is what direction we're facing. We don't care about a length or a size. And we want to store this in move vector, and we're going to store this magnitude as move speed. Now the other action that we need to add is controller simple move. So here under action browser, you'll again look for controller, and you'll find controller simple move, and then add. The move vector, what direction you're going to move, is the move vector. That's the only vector that we have. And the speed, we're going to select run speed. You can select move speed, and that would mean that you would have to come in here to your finite state machine every time you wanted to change or tweak what the speed is that Sancho is running at. We're going to choose run speed so that we can edit it right from the inspector. And this part right here is really important. We are going to select, make sure that this is set to self. So move relative to what? Relative to your local game object coordinates, not the world components or coordinates. If you select world, you're going to get some really messed up behavior. So make sure this is set to self. Now, if we don't do anything else, Sancho is just going to slide around. We don't want him just slide around. We want him to animate. We want him to walk. We want him to run around our world. So we're going to come back to the action browser and add play animation. Not random animation like we had for the idle, just play animation. Because there is only one animation we want to have playing when Sancho is moving. And so with that added, the ellipses here will let you select the animation you want to play, or select run, and that should be it. We should be good to go. And now we can come up here, the gear, and say select all. You see the keyboard shortcut, Control A. We'll select all. And then we're going to copy. Control C, or from the menu here, copy selected actions. Now we are going to create a new state. So add state, move backwards, and then right here, we can paste all of our actions. So all the actions that we created in the move forward, we can just paste in to move backward. Nice, right? And notice that all the things here are the same. Now, the only difference is the axis vector. So now, since we are since we're trying to go back, we press the down button. Our axis vector before was pointing forward. Now it's pointing backward. So that's going to be our direction of motion. Okay. So now, if with those set, and we link the backward event to move backward, and then the stop from move backward back to idle. And if we hit play, oops, should say one other thing. Your main camera is probably still out here somewhere. So maybe it's like this, and you have a game view of this with your main camera out as a parent object in the hierarchy. We press forward, we see Sancho moving, but that's going to be tough controlling with this fixed view camera. We want to make sure that the camera follows our knight. So we're going to make the camera a child object of Sancho. So I'm going to grab our camera, and I'm going to drag it onto the knight object. Notice now that it puts it under the knight, indented. So that means that the camera is now a child of the knight. So I'm going to come back to scene view. With the main camera selected, I can see what the camera is going to see. And, well, that's awkward. I want this camera to be behind Sancho. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my inspector. Under transform, I'm going to click reset. Now notice that puts it right down there at the base of Sancho's feet. So I'm going to raise this up a bit. Let's say up a meter, and that might be too high. How about 0.5? That puts it about the level of Sancho's head. Great. But I don't want to be looking through Sancho's eyes, so I want to kind of be looking over his shoulder. I want to be back a little bit. And so I'm going to change the Z coordinate to, say, -1. There. Now I can see in the camera preview, that gives me a nice little view of Sancho. Now, if I hit play, I move forward, I move back, the camera moves with Sancho. Nice. But there's something weird here. Notice that when I move backward, the animation of Sancho's feet, the run animation, still plays like he's trying to move forward. So it's like he's moonwalking, and we don't want that. We want him to actually run backwards. And so this part isn't in your text. This is going to be something a little different. So we're going to come back here, select Knight, and in our move forward, or actually in our move backward, we're going to come here and we're going to click on the action browser, and I want to set the animation speed. So set animation speed right there under animation. All right. Now it's going to add it to the bottom of the list. That's a problem. These actions in your state machine happen in order. So in other words, from top down, it's going to execute these actions in the order in which they appear. And so we want to set the animation speed before we play the animation. So to move this up in the order, I'm just going to click and hold and drag this till it's right above play animation. Now that we've added our set animation speed, and we've got it placed in the right order here, right above our play animation, we still need to tell it what animation to set the speed of. And so we're going to set it to run. Now, right now with the speed of 1, it's going to play the run as it is in our existing clip. We can change that speed to speed it up, make him run that animation faster, slower, whatever we want. Now our walk backward speed, our run speed is going to be the same as our run speed for moving forward. So we want the animation to play at the same rate. We just want it to play backwards. So under speed, we'll call this -1. Now, I've also done this for the set animation speed on the move forward. I'm going to click this checkbox right here. So I'm going to leave that in my state machine or in my action list here. But with that checkbox deselected, it's not going to execute that. So watch the behavior now. So I go forward, and that looks great. I walk backward. Hey, that looks great. He's actually walking backward. He's still walking backward. So I go backward, and it looks fine, but now he's still walking backward. That's because it still keeps that that speed that I set, the -1. It's running the run animation backward all the time until I tell it not to. So on our move forward, we need to make sure we select this, speed of 1. So now it works out great.